Hey guys, welcome to Science this week after spring break. I hope you had a great time. This week we have two lessons. Essentially, we have one lesson where we're just going to review everything we've done last week. We're going to have some practice based on the things that I saw when I was looking over your lessons. Then we're going to have our final assessment. That's it for this week. As you can see, if you open up this first slide, actually this lesson is called O4 Mutations Practice. You can find it in Google Classroom. Blue slides are information. White slides have questions that you need to respond to. If you see something that you want to see the transitions, go ahead and put it in presenter mode up here. You can always take it out of presenter mode to answer. And do not forget to turn these in so your teachers can see them. Here is your do now. I'm going to read it to you and I want you to pause the video and fill it out. Below, I have given you my answer. And remember, it doesn't help just to look at what the teacher had said, or I would just be talking to you and expecting you to learn. So you need to actually do the do now, think about it, write it, go back and see what I wrote and go, oh, okay, I see where you were going, Mr. Murphy. So that made sense, but I didn't understand that part. So this says two frog parents with only dominant alleles for a long tongue have a baby frog. So they both have big T, big T. What tongue trait would you expect their offspring to have? What kind of tongue? Long, short, no tongue, orange tongue? Tell me what you think here. Explain how it is possible for the offspring to have a short tongue. Now these parents have two big T's. How is it possible their offspring have a short tongue? That's the question. I want you to practice using the words mutation, gene, protein, and trait. You can use this sentence starter to begin. Now this is actually a really important question. This is how you're going to meet standard on your assessment. These are kind of tricky, but once you get it, they're kind of the same answer no matter what organism. If I ask you about flowers or cacti or frogs or cheetahs, the answer is always going to be about the same. So I want you to try to use these words. Try now, pause the video. Do it, pause it. Okay, I hope you guys typed it in. Below on slide, I think 12, there's an example for you. Here's what we're going to do today. I have a Science of the Day. I'm going to let you guys read that over. I'm going to go over the rubric with you. We're going to review last week. I'm going to go over the old exit tickets from last week's lessons. And then I'm going to start some of these practice questions with you and then let you do the rest. Here is our scientist of the day. His name is Dr. Jerome Adams. He is our Surgeon General. Read about him. He's really cool. Here's the first thing we're going to do today. It's the meeting standard on our rubric. We have to be able to describe how the structure of a gene and a mutation affects a protein and its traits. These came from lessons 1 and 2 last week. So here's what one of the exit tickets look like. How the DNA, which has these 4 letters, creates RNA, which creates the proteins, which makes life. Proteins are these little molecules that just do everything. They make up parts of your body. You know, like muscles are made of proteins, but they also break things down. They put things together. They do chemical reactions. They're like little machines that do everything your body needs. So proteins are really important. Here's another part of that exit ticket. The big thing here is that B is correct here. Genes are instructions for how to make proteins with a specific shape. They don't actually physically build proteins. Let me go on with that here. I put this analogy in for you guys based on what I saw from that exit ticket question. A chromosome, which is those big molecules of DNA, they look like little X's. Here's a picture of them up here. They're like a cookbook. A gene is like one recipe in that cookbook. And a gene is a recipe for how to build a protein. They don't actually build the proteins. The genes don't build the proteins. They are a recipe for how to build the protein. So the amino acids are like the ingredients of a cake. The amino acids are like the ingredients. The ingredients of a cake would be what? Flour, sugar, water, salt, etc. But for a protein, you use amino acids. And so the ribosome then is like the baker. The ribosome actually takes the amino acids and links them together and builds the protein. Like the baker takes flour and sugar and milk and eggs and mix it together and makes your cake. So the genes don't actually make the proteins. The genes are codes, they're recipes for how the protein should be built. And that's important because proteins are essential. They do everything in our body and they need to have the perfect shape. If you think of proteins like a tool, here's a picture of some wrenches down here. You could not lose one of these wrenches and go, oh, that's okay. I have 7 more. I'm just going to use this other wrench in place of the first one that I lost. Those wrenches are different shapes. They have a really specific job. They only fit specific size bolts, and you can't interchange them. If they don't have the right shape, they can't do their job. The same thing for a protein. If you have a mutation where your gene is different, So your protein is different. It can't do its job the same. Maybe actually does its job better. That's rare. Sometimes it doesn't do its job at all. And that's a problem. And so that's why you would get different traits. So that brings us to this right here, where the DNA codes for the proteins in our body, and our proteins determine what traits we have. Like Mr. Murphy has a mutation where his genes do not make the pigment in his eyes, like all of you have brown eyes. My proteins don't actually make my eyes brown. I think actually the proteins just don't work. And so this is what the color of your eyes look like if you don't have those proteins. And so I have a different trait. I have blue eyes. A mutation is a change in a gene. It's letters like this. This could be a short piece of DNA. And I asked you to rewrite them last week from lesson number 2. And here's an example of how you could rewrite them. I just changed one letter. And as long as you don't have the exact same 6 letters, it is a mutation, because it's just a difference. As you're copying, you make a little mistake. So here is number 3 is an important question. This gives you an opportunity to see what, like the question from the Do Now. So if somebody inherited this gene, if this gene gave you brown eyes and you inherited this gene, what would happen? So I wrote, if someone inherited the mutated gene, then their protein could be in a different shape. And if that happens, their trait might be different, and maybe they would have blue or green eyes like I was talking about. Okay, so here is the answer to the Do Now from above. I hope that you guys wrote it. You guys can compare what you wrote to what I wrote. So I would expect the offspring to have a long tongue, right? They should have a long tongue if you looked at that Punnett square. But they have a short tongue, and that's because if the baby had a short tongue, then there must have been a mutation, which changed the letters, which changed the sequence of letters in the gene. And that caused the protein to have a different shape and the trait to change to a short tongue trait, even though we expect them to have a long tongue. This type of question here on slide 13 is just like the questions you're going to see on your assessment. I have a little family tree, and there's a little flow charts over here. So I wanted to give you this as like a practice. I'm going to just explain to you how to do it. I'm going to let you do it. In cactuses, the dominant allele for thorn length is long T, and the recessive allele for thorn length is little t. In the model below, parent cactus 1 and 2 have both big T's alleles for thorn length. They reproduce, and they make one offspring, and that offspring has no thorns. Wait, what? They have big T, big T, big T, big T, and this one had just neither of those, like no thorns at all? What happened? I want you to fill in anything outlined in green. So you're going to fill in the code down here. You're going to fill in these boxes here. So here's the beginning to this model. Parent cactus 1 and 2, they have this gene, CCT-GAT. That's the gene. And that makes this protein. And that makes the trait to have long thorns. But what happened so that their offspring has no thorns? Can you tell me what the new code would be? You don't have to be exact, but what could it be? And then here's the protein. I'm telling you that this code, whatever you're going to come up with, some kind of new gene code, is going to make this mutant protein. It's going to make a different shape. And that's going to give you what trait you should already know by if you read this scenario. So pause now. I'll pause my recording. You're going to pause your video, and you're going to go fill that out. Go back and listen to what I just said, or read the scenario again. Try to fill out the green things. Go now. Go. Okay, so I hope you came up with a new code that was a mutation, and I hope that you wrote no thorns here. So I'm looking at number 14 now. So you have the same code, but now we have that meeting standard question, right? So now we have to think about, well, why did that happen? Why does the offspring cactus have a different trait that it could not have inherited directly from its parents because we know their genotypes? We're going to try to use this word trait. We're going to try to use the word mutation, or maybe we want to say mutated gene or mutant or something like that, and we're going to use the word protein. So I want you to finish the sentence, an offspring cactus has a different trait because. And if you need an example, go back, because on slide 12, I gave you the example here. And actually, there's another example on slide 11, down here for number 3. So there's multiple examples to help you. Give this a shot. And then do another one on slide 15. This one's for flowers. You have a mother flower where you, there should be essentially cloned asexual offspring. Sometimes some plants you can like cut a piece of them and just grow a brand new plant from that piece. That piece would be called a cutting, plant cuttings right here. And so, but one of them has a different shape of the petal on the flower. That's the colorful part on the flower. How did that happen? It should have been an exact clone of the mom. Same question, right? You see what I'm saying here? It's the same question. It's going to have a very similar answer to what you wrote in 14, what your examples are in slides 12 and 11. Pause now, work on those two slides. Okay, we're moving on. I hope that you have given the chance to do those. I have 5 minutes left in this recording, so I'm going to quickly go over this part where you have to determine if a trait is harmful, beneficial, or neutral, and justify it. And specifically, justify it how the change in trait, the mutation, affects the ability of the organism to survive in its environment, okay? So here's an example. This bacteria has a thick cell wall. Cell walls are used to protect themselves from antibiotics. That means this mutation should be beneficial. You should take the point of view of the organism with the mutation. So you're taking the point of view, like if I was the bacterium, is it helpful, beneficial to me, or is it harmful to me? Does it help me survive or make it harder to survive? In this case, it is beneficial because having a stronger cell wall would protect it and make it more likely to survive if there are antibiotics in the environment. If there are no antibiotics in the environment, it actually might not help that much. So that part about the environment is actually really important. So here I'm going to do these 3 slides to kind of explain how do you know if a mutation is beneficial, harmful, or neutral. And I'm going to give you an example of each, and then there's 4 questions for you to finish. So a mutation is beneficial if it makes it more likely the organism will survive long enough in its environment to reproduce. It's all about reproduction with life. Living things don't exist except to make more living things. Like if you take 3 steps back and look at life in general, that's what life is doing. The species, the group of organisms that is not interested in reproducing, doesn't exist anymore because they all died out. They didn't make more of themselves. So it's all about surviving and reproduce. So here's an example from lesson number 3. I should say lesson, fixing it. If a frog had a longer, stickier tongue, it would be beneficial. And in my mind, that's because it would be more likely to survive because it can catch more flies. And so it could survive, more likely to survive and reproduce. Here's an example of a harmful mutation. A harmful mutation makes it less likely to survive and reproduce. So example from lesson number 3, fix that here. If a cactus had a mutation that made it have no thorns, that would be harmful for sure. Because from the point of view of the cactus, it can't protect itself. That makes it less likely to survive and reproduce in its environment for sure. And then we have neutral mutations. A neutral mutation is one that does not make it more or less likely to survive. It just is. So example would be like you have a mutation that gives you blue eyes, like me. It actually doesn't help me or hurt me to reproduce, to survive. No one's like, oh my gosh, I can't run as fast as a bear because I have blue eyes. So if a person has a mutation, it would be neutral. This is because eye color would not make it more or less likely to survive and reproduce. Another way to say that is this is because eye color does not affect its ability to survive and reproduce. That's how you know it's neutral. So if you want to go back and listen to the last 2 minutes of my explaining those 3 slides, and you should always be able to figure out if something's beneficial or harmful. I will say this, that some people, for the frog one here, told me that it was harmful because, and they gave me the because, and I loved that. They said because maybe the tongue was going to stick to their mouth, and then they couldn't like get as many flies. Well, if that's true, if it's so sticky that it's like stuck inside their mouth, then it would be harmful because they wouldn't be able to eat enough flies. And so it would be less likely in that case that they survive and reproduce. And so if you think about the trait differently than I'm thinking, you can still get the right answer because you've justified it. You've said, I think this is true because, and you've explained why it's more or less likely to survive and reproduce in its environment. And we're just talking hypothetically about a trait. We don't know what actually would happen, and so I would totally give you credit for that. So now, starting on number 21, there's 4 more examples, a couple about alligators. What else did I have? 3 about alligators and 1 about flowers here. So check all those out. I wanted to make sure you guys knew that flowers, cacti, bacteria are all living things. They all have genes. They all can have mutations, which changes their traits. So I wanted to make sure to include things that weren't animals as well. Work on those. One more thing. If you have a question, go to Google Classroom and find this document, the 7th grade science question doc. Ms. Beatty and I are both going to use this. I put some questions in here. What is a mutation? I went over that. Why does a protein have to have a specific shape? I went over that. How do I know if a mutation is harmful or beneficial? I went over that. If you add your questions, put your name on it, we can get back to you, or we can make another video where we explain these questions and it becomes clear to everybody. So record any questions right here, and we can all take care of it together, because if you have the question, chances are other people do too. Thanks, guys. Get to work. Let us know what questions you have. We miss you. We'll see you soon. Bye.